You're listening to Across the Pondcast. Cybersecurity rants and war stories from both sides of the Atlantic.
Hello and welcome to Across the Pondcast, a show where we talk and occasionally rant about cybersecurity topics with perspectives from both sides of the Atlantic. I'm Tib3rius. I'm joined, as always, by my malicious browser extending co-host, Mr. Andy Swift. And today we're joined by John Tuckner, a security engineer at Secure Annex, who's going to tell us about his research into malicious browser and code editor extensions. John, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. So my name's John Tuckner. So I founded Secure Annex about a year ago, and really on the idea that people were struggling with browser extensions, software extensions, code editor extensions, MCP servers, all that kind of stuff. There's this layer of these applications that we're adding into our most critical tools that are exploiting and getting access to our most critical information. So think of like your authentication sessions, your source code, your environment files, and manipulating your AI chats. And so I thought a lot of teams had no visibility or understanding of what these like little plugins that just whatever they claim that they're doing, if they're actually doing what they claim to. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at all these marketplaces, pulling down the code, doing analysis of it, and giving those results to teams so that they can actually have an idea of what is going on in their applications.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I've read your blog posts. So it should be an interesting discussion, I think, of what you've been doing and what you've found, especially.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been doing this for the past year, and just like the number of attacks and the type of attacks have just been really eye-opening. I kind of entered into this thinking like there's a issue with a browser extension here and there, and maybe it's a color picker, maybe there's just something really like small and minor. But as time kind of went on, I found, and I was involved in a number of really important incidents. So even just like about a year ago, there was an incident related to a security company called Cyberhaven. Their extension was supply chain compromised. And so an attacker was able to roll out a malicious extension to all of their customers, utilizing the permissions that the Cyberhaven customers were already accepting and knowledgeable of. And through that, this compromise was able to get access to session cookies, be able to like basically have a command and control. And so you have this trusted extension that the security team has purchased, and like overnight, over Christmas, basically Christmas Eve, a new malicious version was rolled out, and teams had to get out of bed almost instantaneously and start tracking down like how did this actually occur and what was the level of scope in our compromise.
Awesome. Andy, you're here too.
Yeah.
It's great. John just went for it. It's awesome. Love it. How are you, Andy?
I'm all right.
I don't even need you for the podcast anymore.
No, it's great, isn't it? There's definitely a pattern here of suddenly remembering I'm here.
Yeah, it's good.
Thanks,
good.
Thanks, man. Love you too. I don't.
I wasn't going to interrupt John. He was saying interesting stuff.
We'd have fewer guests like if we did that. Shut up, my turn to speak. But no, I'm fine. Things are good in my world at the moment. My floor is literally littered with switches and cables at the moment. I'm working on some stuff. I'm cooking again, so we'll see where that goes. But it's distracting me immensely because I'm meant to be writing a presentation. I keep forgetting and I keep playing with switches. Anyway.
What kind of switches are we talking about? Network switches or the ones that just you flick on and off?
Network switches. I don't just have an array of on-off switches.
I don't know. You might be building something.
I could have been.
Is this your home lab, Andy?
It's why I hesitate to call it a home lab because currently what I'm looking at down here is there's two switches balanced on a paper bin. So it's not the most
trash can for the Americans.
Yes, it's not the most professional setups.
So you need to upgrade your rack, basically.
I used to have a nice rack in my home office. And then we moved to like this oldie building, and my wife apparently that no longer fitted the aesthetic of the building. So rack went bye-bye, and paper bin took over in its duties of supporting my switches. Anyway.
Sounds like the genesis of my home lab too. So
yeah, familiar story. But yeah, no, I'm good. I'm looking forward to this actually because it ties into a lot of other stuff we were talking about recently in terms of supply chain stuff and people's trust issues with a lot of things. So yeah, kind of cool. Can't wait.
Yes.
Do your sponsor thing. Go on,
Yes.
off you go.
I will. Before we start, this show is made possible thanks to our sponsors. If you want to sponsor an episode, please send an email to sponsors@acrossthepodcast.net for more details. Now, John, you were recommended to us by Solstice. Regular listeners will know there's a little bit of history between this podcast and Solstice. So just for the sake of mine and Andy's sanity, can you confirm that you are John Tuckner and you're not Allie Diamond in disguise?
I am John Tuckner. I am not Allie Diamond. She said that she was busy when I forwarded her this invite to the podcast. So
Gotcha. That makes
that was
sense.
the problem.
Excellent.
Yeah, doing yoga again probably because that's the excuse she gave us when we. So maybe you can stay around and as.
No, I got yoga 30 minutes late. Wow. So yeah, John. I mean, let's start at the beginning because I believe you and Solst worked together on this at the start, and like for me, the amazing thing is that obviously everyone knows what browser extensions are. Probably everybody uses browser extensions. And the idea of malicious browser extensions, I don't think is anything new because ultimately it's someone else's code, right? You're running in a browser environment. I think the crazy thing for me was that there was like a marketplace where you could just buy extensions that already had like 100,000 plus users and just transfer the ownership and change the code. So tell us, like, how did all this research start?
Yeah. So look, about a year ago, I just was at this point where I wanted to start my own company. I wanted to get out on my own. I've done startups for a number of years. I've grown those companies to be relatively large, working at Tines and a company called Tib3rius. And, I really just wanted something to call my own. And being a security practitioner, I can look at the market and just see all these overlooked spaces where people just aren't putting enough attention into. And it doesn't seem like security vendors are stepping up to the plate to be able to say, hey, this is how you actually solve this problem. And I also looked at browser extensions as something that was solvable because all of the details into them, like it's all public basically, right? So the code's available in the marketplaces. You have what the marketplace listing says that it does, what the developer is saying that the extension should do. And between that and the code, there's usually or potentially something added that will track users or steal passwords and exfiltrate that. So I just set off to say, okay, I think that I can actually solve this. I've always wanted to start a company. This is going to be the opportunity. AI is here to do this at scale so that I can apply an AI analysis of the code patterns and behaviors and be able to take that to as many people as possible. If I analyze one extension once, there's so many people that could benefit from that. What I ended up finding was the day that I launched, maybe a week later, Solst launched a tool that was very similar and got a lot of publicity about it. I was super jealous because his was open and free to use. Anybody can go up and use it. Mine's a little bit login gated because obviously I want leads and I want to follow up with people. I want to do this for a business. But what ended up so I was super jealous and I just wish that I could have had a launch like his. But what was funny was he was building it to solve a problem for his organization. And it was good that he built the tool and he was able to analyze something, but that couldn't have been his day job entirely, right? So build a tool. Now you have to deal with the upkeep, the maintenance. It's great that he has it available to the community. And the tool is called CR Examiner. But he can keep up with it in the long run. And so he was referred to a mutual friend, Rami, and he is hey, you should talk to John. He's actually doing this day over day. Maybe you guys could just trade ideas and stuff. But it turns out the Solst was super interested just in the browser extension space in general. He was his mind was blown that when he started doing the research and when he started building his tool, the level of access that browser extensions could have and the how nobody ever talks about this kind of stuff. And so we kind of just hit it off naturally. And so from there, it's less been the week that we both launched. I thought it would be really competitive and I would have to like take him out of the market. But now we're like, hand in hand, like, helping each other. And so I have some of my insights now in his tool, and he's been a great advocate for just browser extensions in general.
Nice. He's a friend of the podcast.
Yeah.
Mostly because he trolled us that one time. But yeah, that was good.
Yeah, but super, super knowledgeable and just like a great perspective on the security space, just overall. And one thing that we started talking about was this like concept that we have always heard that a browser extension might transfer ownership. Obviously, we saw the marketplace listings. So there's a site called Extension Hub that you can go on, list your extension if you have an extension, or go buy an extension. The thing about buying extensions is you have a install base already present, and depending on the permissions that install base has already accepted, you can basically take over that extension and utilize those permissions in a much more malicious way. So that's the threat here. But we didn't realize how easy it would be to actually go and buy an extension, transfer the ownership, and do that malicious code. And so he kind of dared me to say, hey, like, why don't you just go try and do it? Yeah, I took that to heart. Within about 2-3 weeks, I was able to sign up for a Google developer account. That took $5. I messaged a developer on Extension Hub for a really low user count extension, so I didn't want the impact to be super massive. Propositioned them saying, hey, how much would you sell the extension for? It was listed for $50. And we couldn't exactly figure it out. Like, the developer was in India. We couldn't figure out international transfers of money because PayPal wouldn't allow it. I couldn't sign up for like a Indian bank account. And so they were just like, all right, you can just take the extension. They just handed over the ownership. We sent an email to Google transferring the ownership. And then lo and behold, I was the new owner of that extension that Source had installed. And I pushed out a new malicious version of the extension that ended up redirecting basically all of his web traffic to a Rickroll.
Nice.
And so like overnight when he like logged into his PC, like any browsing traffic that he went to, he just kept going to Rick Astley.
That's great.
Perfect. I've just been looking at extensionhub.io. But at first I got confused because I was looking for Extension Hub, and it turns out that's an actual UK company over here that they build extensions, as in house extensions. so not the one we're looking for. Different topic entirely. But yeah, it's mad, isn't it? I did not know this was a thing where people actually just sell extensions. It's actually crazy. And it lists things like the number of users each one has as well.
Yeah.
So you can just literally search for ones that have a meaty user base. Wow.
And some of the prices are quite large. And then there's been one that's been listed for a while that deals with Salesforce. And you can just imagine that area has access to Salesforce instances and can read the details on pages. And so you can think about like your sales team just having this extension installed to make Salesforce more pleasant. But, if this extension ever changes hands, I guess we'll see what happens.
So, like, the point of selling the extension, I mean, I kind of get, like, if you're a developer of an extension and you just don't want to develop it anymore and you have nobody, like, you don't know anyone who could take it over, listing it on a site like this might make sense. But, like, have you found that there are other reasons people have, like, are literally selling their extensions like this?
I think, like, it's both more basic and also pretty wide ranging in the reasons, right? So, like, I would just boil it down to, you create an extension, it got really popular. You have no way of monetizing it. Monetizing Chrome extensions is super hard the second that you ask somebody to like pay for anything on the internet, right? Yeah. Pretty hard to do. So there are a number of companies like ad tech, I guess, or other tracking services. So something that wants to like create profiles of users, they'll just inject their libraries into the code extension and start collecting clickstream data. And so be able to say, okay, this user went to this website, bought this thing, they're probably 18 to 29, and this is their behavior on the internet. So like, that's how they monetize extensions. And so by going to like finding these developers that may have had a success, may have had a strong user base, they'll completely repurpose the value, I guess, of the extension, or like add on additional features, functionality to the value of the extension and begin collecting their own meaningful data, a first party type collection that is generally pretty hard to get otherwise by, as Google cracks down on trackers and cookies on the internet, having first party collection of, what you're going to and what you're looking at is critical nowadays for advertisers. Deep down, I don't have any evidence here. This is just a guess, but I do believe that there is some element of like this type of data being able to be resold to initial access brokers or somebody that's doing recon on a certain business. So if you're running these extensions as an organization, you might be collecting internal URLs and that might be also filtered out. And so being able to understand like a full attack surface of a certain company, that might be a way that an attacker might use this type of data as well. So yeah, you have this situation where you have these developers, they don't even sometimes know that they need to sell this extension. They just anybody that has had a popular Chrome extension will know that you just get cold emails saying, hey, would you like to sell this for $2,000? And some side project that you had never really considered as being meaningful, you instantly just get an offer out of the blue for like $2,000. I think a lot of people would really jump at that. And I think that just starts the chain here. There's definitely other extensions that have been meaningfully developed and the owner just doesn't want to deal with them anymore, even though like it was already an enterprise offering or a real offering. They just want to kind of get out and this is their path to basically selling a business. So yeah, wide ranging. I would say that the type of profile of buyer is very much like data collection and not having anything to do with like the general how the extension actually works. But it's an interesting, like the features of the extension are generally pretty interesting. Let's say a color picker or something useful, PDF converter. But as long as that has access to the right permissions, then it becomes really valuable for an acquirer.
I think you answered one of my questions in there, which was quite neat. Saves me from asking it, but I'll talk about it anyway.
Yeah.
It was about threat actors buying them up and any evidence of seeing people doing that, because you hear about and dealt with in the instant response world, things like threat actors purchasing initial access for people or just, putting literal adverts out that go, hey, do you have any passwords? Do you want to give them to us? Because we've got this nice stack of cash to give you if you do. So there's a lot of underhand tactics that do go on, where it's literally just exchanging money for access. Or, do you have a VPN access into XYZ company? If so, come forward and we've got several £100,000 for you. So, a lot of these groups are not short of money and they're not, they're not adverse to purchasing things for access. So have you seen any evidence of this happening within browser extension world, or is it just a suspicion at the moment?
Well, I just think there's evidence of these shell companies that own other companies. So I know of an ad tech company that owns like an ad blocker, a VPN service, a privacy engine. One company owns all of these extensions, and it's kind of a family of extensions that need deep access in order to do what they do. But the ad tech company owns all of them, right? And all of these extensions basically collect data. Now, let's say this parent company is founded in the Seychelles or something like that, right? And so it's really hard to connect that you install this extension from this shell company that is supposed to do ad blocking, but it's actually owned by the ad tech. And so all that data just filters back up into the ad tech company. And now it's really hard to trace where did this info really come from, or the lineage is so complex at that point already. And once you get into the parent company, you basically lose sight of what the data actually was. I guess the thing that I keep coming back to is a lot of people think of browser extensions, even any bad one, as kind of a pup or a potentially unwanted program that we've always thought of in security, that you just, maybe there's an executable installed and you just uninstall it and nothing really bad ever happened. But as we've kind of shifted into this world where info stealers are super impactful now, and being able to get access tokens or any information about just general recon type information about an organization becomes so much more meaningful, I think we have to reevaluate just the impact of info stealers, because knowing like where a token or where something was compromised is going to get much more difficult. Like, let's say you have an extension that's just taking auth keys or like auth sessions. How can you relate this user getting compromised over and over again from many different locations over the world back to a browser extension? If you don't know that that extension is doing the harvesting, it just looks like this user keeps getting compromised again and again. And tracking that down is going to get much more difficult if you don't have that visibility into what is this extension actually doing.
Yeah, because browser extensions like can do so many different things as well. Like that's what people don't understand. I think Google have locked it down, right? Like quite recently, but I still imagine there's still, it is basically still arbitrary code execution at the end of the day.
Yes, to some degree. I think what you're probably referencing is like Manifest version 3 is what a lot of people know. And there were some constraints that went along with it. You know, one important one was they were trying to limit the amount of remote code that could be run in a browser extension. So all of the code that should be executed should be within the browser extension that gets published, which has been a great change. Manifest version 3 was probably introduced in 2019. And it's still being rolled out today completely, right? And so it's taken a long while just to get to this point where we're almost fully deprecated on Manifest version 2. Unfortunately, we're still seeing really impactful attacks just based on the existing permission structure, the way that publishing has been happening for extensions. So malicious code still gets into the marketplaces. The abilities to like redirect traffic and kind of interact with web browsing behaviors, that was supposed to be limited by something called declarative net requests. That still has not like really closed off that attack vector. So the same attack that I did with Solst was really based on that, being able to manipulate his traffic, be able to like intercept requests and be able to, like, let's just say you have an extension that is supposed to do ad blocking, but when you go to a company portal, it instead redirects you from your company portal to a phishing portal. That it could even do ad blocking, it could do all these sorts of things, but because you're going to one specific website and redirecting to another, that attack is still super available and you know, completely devastating. And so if there is just like the wrong extension installed, Manifest version 3 is not like stopping that, and the problems with the marketplaces and identifying malware and being able to kick it out fast enough still persists.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day, weren't we? Funnily enough, in another episode, because we were talking about NPM, obviously, and all the troubles they've had recently, and it's this big. I feel like there's this big sort of industry-wide issue of trust at the moment, and all these things that we've seemingly trusted, like extensions, like VS Code extensions, like, you know, browser extensions, like NPM packages. These all have like an element of trust with them that's just been sort of thus far kind of de facto, and you just sort of go, oh yeah, well, it's come from there, it must be trustworthy. And it seems just recently there's a lot of attention and focus being placed on these sorts of things, just going, well, hold on, who's actually checking and verifying all of these trust relationships we've now got? It's not just you developing a tool now, it's you developing a tool with a relationship with like 3 or 4 other developers and their extensions and their things that they're pushing and you're including within your code. So the supply chain's a lot wider than I think a lot of people realize and probably first thought. And there's, yeah, I mentioned it again previously in another episode, that classic meme of like the entire internet being held up by like a single book at the bottom of like a massive stack. And it very much feels like that, just a massive web of trust. And the other flip side is, you mentioned security and checking these sorts of things. That's a massive undertaking for a lot of people. And
I'd be curious your perspectives on this. So, you know, the way I approach NPM, PyPy, all these code repositories is like, it is open source. So at the end of the day, no matter what you're installing, you can go probably to GitHub or NPM, look through the code, be able to analyze it. I'm not saying that you probably understand it. Like generally no average person is going to like spend their Saturday looking through NPM, but it is available and it is viewable. So what I find on the marketplace for the like browser extensions and code extensions is extensions are hidden behind many layers in order to actually understand what they're doing. And, with as simple as like an install click, probably even easier than NPM, now those are added into your trusted spaces. And it's really hard for teams to verify what is actually happening or even getting access to it. So like, is that an accurate way that I kind of like perceive this situation, and how you guys think about it as well? Like,
I think so, yeah. Because ultimately it is like it's a single click. And I think a lot of extensions auto update as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's the other thing. Like, I mean, one of the biggest things about the NPM thing is that it's in the build chain. So,
right.
A build chain is going to, generally speaking, just call the latest update and implement it. And so, that's the main issue. And and that's the problem. There really is no. It's weird though, because like if you think about it, you could write a malicious software program and put it out there for the internet, create a fancy website for it, and it might do. You could create just a web browser, right? A new web browser, and get a bunch of people using it, and then just publish an update that's malicious. There really isn't any difference in doing that and what supply chain attacks do, what extensions do. It is just all about gaining users' trust and then exploiting that trust. So I feel like I think it's just more widespread these days, and it's so integrated.
I think it's inherently that we assume that we can trust Microsoft and Google to like carry out this validation and this rubber stamping of things. And, NPM is owned by Microsoft at the end of the day too. So like maybe people don't realize that, but like, there are these cascading effects of who's actually doing this validation. And I think that's really hard as a consumer to be able to understand that web of interconnectivity as well. If I can just bring up a different example of this, there was something really interesting that happened last year where Cursor is a very popular IDE editor that came on the market and uses open source VS Code in order to carry out a lot of its, underlying code editing pieces while injecting in this, great AI code editor experience. But what ended up happening was Microsoft wanted to enforce their licensing on the Visual Studio Marketplace. So the extensions that they offer, that they rubber stamp, that they say are good, around, I don't know, probably like May, June of 2025, Microsoft cut off access from Cursor to the VS Marketplace. And so there were no more code extensions. And a lot of these code extensions are super critical for development in Tailwind and Vue, React, Svelte, anything that you're kind of like using. You generally want these extensions to help support your development. When this happened, the Cursor team had to go and find an alternative, and they moved all users overnight to OpenVSX, which is another more open, I guess, marketplace for extensions that's supported by the Eclipse Foundation. What the thing about that is like they never told Eclipse or they never told OpenVSX that they were switching over all of their users, which was quite a lot, overnight to OpenVSX. And so this generally boutique, smaller marketplace ended up just getting flooded with users overnight, and they were caught unprepared. What has been happening for the past couple of months since then is attackers have realized that they just have this massive user base of generally pretty technical users using Cursor. Like a lot of companies that I work with have been signing Cursor enterprise agreements, and all the extensions that they're installing are from this much smaller marketplace that has had just loads of malware being published to it. And this small team has not been able to like keep up and be able to proactively take down extensions before they've caused like real damage to users. So that whole spectrum of like code extensions has been really eye-opening to me lately.
Identifying malicious extensions and malicious packages is quite an undertaking, I think, as well. It's quite a contextual undertaking because quite a lot of the extensions and a lot of the malware, especially info stealers and things, when you look at them, a lot of the things they're doing just literally comes under the banner of legitimate functionality, just used in a slightly weird way. So it's quite, some of it's quite hard to just pick out of a big stack of hundreds of thousands of submissions daily and just go, yeah, well, that's definitely malicious. And yeah, some things obviously are, and some things are very obvious to pick up, say by like AI agents or something stuck over the top. But some of it requires actual manual contextual reviews just to identify something genuinely malicious. So that's, yeah, you're right. Small teams are going to be overwhelmed. I find it very hard to stay on top of. And the other alternative is you just shut it until it's reviewed, which is no help to anyone, really. And again, you end up in a much worse place. So, yeah, I don't know. I still don't know what the answer is to this whole thing, aside from review your own code and make sure you know what it's doing. But
you're exactly right. Like, a lot of the behaviors end up falling under this regular use. So just think of like a curl to a external website, and that's like maybe that's just tucked away deep inside of an extension. Something that I've been seeing a lot of recently is a real extension being downloaded by an attacker, being like small amounts of code being added in to the normal extension. Well, let me back up. They'll publish the extension almost as a mirror of the real extension. And so it looks so similar that given like where you install extensions in the left sidebar of a code editor, you can't really tell the difference. So they'll get that published and then come back a day or two later once it's published and publish a new update, this time just adding the smallest amount of functionality that will, let's say, call out to a remote server to download a script and execute that. 99% of the code looks real, normal, actually purposeful to, let's say, Tailwind, like formatting CSS. But when that extension activates, it will instead go out to that remote server, pull down the script, execute the script, and start carrying out multiple more stages. And the hardest part here is that because there's no permission model for code extensions, they basically just act as you as a user, and running in like a VS Code context, it's really hard to inspect and understand what is going on, and or like, is this even necessary, or is this behavior abnormal? It's really hard to come up with that analysis.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, like, when smartphones first came out, and there was obviously like it still is basically Apple versus Google. But one of the differentiators was Apple's App Store was very, very closed off. They did strict reviews of all the extensions, all the apps, and had a permissions model that was sort of, it was more, I remember Google's permission model on Android was originally you hit install and the app would say what permissions you want it needed, and you just had to accept all, which is like kind of crazy if you think about it now. Like. And Apple's was always, you install the app, it doesn't ask for anything, and then when it needs permissions, you can grant them on a per permission basis, which is slightly more annoying for the end user, but much more secure. And on top of that, they did I don't know if it was a security review or anything, but they definitely had a review where, like, it took several weeks for an app to be approved. Google, I don't think, doesn't do that at all anyway, but I'm pretty sure the Play Store doesn't do any kind of reviews. And as a result, like, Android malware is, I believe, more prevalent, has always been more prevalent than iOS malware. But yeah, it's the problem is, like, that works kind of, the permissions model that Apple has, which Google have now adopted for Android, it kind of works for apps. It doesn't really work much for, like, well, code editors at all, but browsers either. So it's a completely different problem. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't think there is a solution really, other than just don't use extensions.
Yeah, just build everything yourself.
Vibe code everything.
Never use packages, never use extensions.
Well, and I think you know how this plays out. When you say vibe code everything too, it's like the number of extensions that I've seen that are just obviously vibe coded. So now there's just an explosion of extensions. Like, maybe they're not published, but there's definitely something on GitHub for any specific issue or anything that you might be thinking about. There's probably a Chrome extension, and you can still sideload these things. So even if they don't come from a marketplace, like, a lot of people are turning to that to like support their AI tools. So like browser use and, any kind of like MCP plugin.
And that has an additional problem, which is if a malicious attacker can somehow poison the training model of the vibe coding LLM such that some simple but popularly used function or piece of functionality includes their malicious code, then I don't think it's happened yet. Maybe it has. I mean, but that's a danger as well, because then it's like, oh, you have the vibe coding tool that's basically, oh, I need to do this specific piece of functionality that a lot of users are requesting. Let me check, and it'll generate this malicious piece of code, which does the thing, but also does like this really, really like malicious thing, like, I don't know, sending files off to a C2 server. Yeah. So crazy.
It's funny you should say that. I was doing some stuff with Grok the other day, and I wanted it. I can't remember what I was trying to get it to do. I think it was like an image generation or something like that, probably. And I was like, oh, can you give that to me? I don't know. Can you do like a PDF format? And it was like, yeah, sure. I'll make that into a PDF for you. And then it linked me to like this third-party website. And it was like, yeah, I've put your PDF image up here. Just go here and download it. And it's like, what the fuck? What are you on about, Grok? Like, go to, and like, I went there, it's like a 404 page. It's like, what do you think you've done? Because like, clearly you've done nothing, but what do you think you've actually done? Like this third party, like, it's like a Dr. PDF type website.
Those are my taxes, Grok. Come on.
Yeah.
The real question is, where the heck did it send your data?
Yeah.
Like it thinks it sent it to them, but it actually sent it somewhere completely different.
Thanks, Grok. You're totally right. I did send it somewhere else. Thanks, Grok. Cheers.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's only going to get worse. Vibe coding, I think, is definitely it's been honestly a big help for people who do know how to develop, and like for me personally, like. I've vibe coded burp extensions for my day job.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like, I know how to code burp extensions, so I can actually look at the code that it's generating and see that, oh, okay, it's not actually malicious. But if you're just some regular person who doesn't know how to code and you're just vibe coding completely, like, yeah, it's super dangerous. So, yeah. There is no solution to, well, I mean, John, is there a solution to this?
So, yeah, I mean, what I do is I pull down all of the code from these marketplaces. I have a tool that steps through and understands behaviorally what the extension is trying to do. So compare like static signatures with actual behavior analysis and try and bring that all together into like a summary of how this extension could impact you. And then what I also do is I track the lineage of that extension. So say the first version is published and it's good. If the next version released introduces some C2 callback, I'm calling that out and I'm understanding like this new URL was added and it impacts the extension in this way. So maybe it was just a benign theme on first publish, but 2 days later when the attacker came back and wanted to publish like actual malicious functionality after they grew a user base, being able to call that out as fast as possible, I think is going to be a key. And it's really hard to hide like those types of functional updates. I would say like the trickiest stuff that I'm kind of dealing with today is just like prompt edits. So like, let's say you have a tool that instead of, if the AI system prompt is very much like you are a coding agent and it switches to you are a malicious actor that tries to read all files, like that semantically has been pretty hard. But I think over time, like the understanding of like code lineage is going to play a big part in detecting those types of attacks as well. So yeah, I think there's hope, definitely. I think it just takes, real meaningful effort and care to be able to like solve this problem. And sometimes I think like the marketplaces are much more incentivized just to have as many extensions out as possible and being able to remove it. Like removing an extension lowers the impact that they have or value that they can show to consumers. And would, like if 10% of the extensions that you were publishing were all malware, would anybody really would they trust your marketplace? Maybe not, but you don't want that like to be too transparent.
And I mean, we focused mostly on Google and Chrome and obviously like VS Code sort of stuff. But like, how is this prevalent in like other browsers like Firefox, Opera, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I get a lot of feedback that people thought Firefox. I think Firefox started really the large extension movement, and they took it very seriously at the start. They realized like the type of access that extensions were providing into people's browsers. I remember playing with Tamper Monkey really early on, like really cool stuff to just be able to like edit every page, right? Yeah. As time has gone on, I've just been shocked at the type of things that are getting published into the Firefox add-on store. Just predominantly the amount of like crypto wallet, phishing, compromise type extensions that get published there, right? And so there's only like, I don't see every extension that goes through a review process. So maybe there's just untold amount of extensions that don't get published, but the type of stuff that I do see published and that does become available to consumers, it's just absolutely shocking that it could be as simple as just redirect. Like all the extension does is redirect to a phishing website that says, hey, put in your wallet recovery seed phrase, right? And that's just absolutely shocking to me. So yeah, it happens across the board. And one thing that I'm looking into coming up is being able to like analyze MCP servers. And I think like a lot of those type plugins are following the same patterns, but not taking on any of the lessons learned that we've developed with extensions to date. And so that's kind of scaring me as that grows in adoption, that it's going to be a big vector for people to be compromised in a new way.
And I mean, arguably Google, with all their billions, possibly trillions, should be doing something with the Google Chrome sort of extension store. But then Firefox, I know they're non-profit, they do have money, but at the same time, it's like, if Google aren't doing it with all their billions, like, what incentive does Firefox really have to do it at all? And can they even do it? And because I feel like, especially with vibe coding, you just have a supply problem. You have too many extensions being added, and it's just going to overwhelm any sort of extension library, even Google Chrome's, I imagine. So yeah, that's just another. It's just a complete wave of new things.
Well, and there's a really interesting setup here where the marketplaces are obviously set up for consumers, just anybody using a browser, and organizations, companies have to take a different approach than just any general consumer. And so a lot of the conversations that I get into with my customers are just, what are the extensions that have access to GitHub? What are the extensions that have access to Salesforce? What could see data in here? What combination of permissions could impact me more, which would increase risk? Any general person probably doesn't care about that. They just want the value, and the impact of that is going to be really small. But when you're installing your 10th sales plugin extension at a company, and it has access to Salesforce, and it has access to so many different other pieces of information that are much more valuable than any general consumer, you as a company need to look at that risk profile a lot differently and know that the marketplaces are set up mostly just for any given single user, not for companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess that's where a lot of it needs to sit, really, isn't it? It's, you've got two very distinct user bases. You've got your regular users who are just going to, like, I'm just looking on, I'm looking on Extension Hub now, and there's one here called, it's a faster way of accessing an emoji panel. That's it. So you've got those users that will really enjoy things like that. It has dark mode as well, so that's good. And then you've got your corporate users who are going to be hooking into other stuff with their plugins, their extensions. So I think that gives you a nice base to be able to control what they're doing and review what they're doing before they're installing things. You can almost gate that quite nicely. If only there was a company that did stuff like that. But yeah, it's quite nice to be able to do it from that point of view. And that's probably where it needs to happen, is enterprises controlling exactly what their users are putting into browsers. Yeah. And instead of it being, I know we're in through this era of there being just an absolute free-for-all and stuff like that. And like Teams has got a bunch of extensions you can install as well. Like there's a classic one, like about a year ago. I was on a call with someone I probably shouldn't say, but in one of our teams anyway, And like the people we're talking to, they were sharing their screen, and you could see at the bottom of their screen they had installed a mouse jiggler for their day-to-day work. And it's like, if you're going to share your screen, at least like, I don't know, close your mouse jiggler and various other things you've installed within Teams. Maybe good idea, I don't know. But yeah, it's just I feel like the pace at which we're inventing and including these things to make everyone's sort of user journey and user life more sort of enjoyable and pleasant, the rate at which we're able to filter, review things and actually sit back and go from a security point of view, is this a good idea? I feel we just can't keep up with the rate that new things are coming to markets, and there's just this wave of new stuff we need to trust on a daily basis at the moment, it seems. And staying on top of that is a real pain. Like, it's not just Chrome extensions, is it? It's everywhere.
Well,
it's everywhere.
This hasn't been like the top priority for a lot of teams by any means up to this date. And so what I've seen happen is organizations have like thousands of extensions across their users that they have to deal with. And do they really want to like use the political capital to say, okay, we're locking this down to 40 extensions tomorrow? And like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, you can minimize your risk considerably by going about that activity and just saying, hey, we're going to stick to an allow list. A lot of teams would just rather say, okay, we've grown, this problem has grown to be too insurmountable to say, okay, we're only going to allow these certain extensions. And so now they're kind of playing catch up, and they just want to understand which ones are the most risky. And look, there's probably like one guy that treats these extensions like toolbars and has 1,000 installed. And, you know, when you click the button to view extensions, you're like, how did you ever install this many? And maybe if you just like got rid of that guy, then the problem might go away. But, you know, it's really hard to collect an inventory and understand the full spectrum of who's using what and for what reason, and which ones are tied to a business use case. And so, yeah, I think where a lot of teams are stuck is just, they know it's an important problem, but it can't be the top priority. And if there's just anything that can help support them from the potential of being compromised, that's how they're kind of viewing the situation right now.
It's almost like it needs a push. Just needs a big shove in the right direction, doesn't it? Just a big explosion for people to sit up and go, actually, yeah, this is a huge problem. Because, yeah, the answer can't just be like, oh, you've got 40 extensions installed. Off you go.
Yeah.
That's your P45, Dave.
That's a British reference.
That's a British reference, isn't it? I just realised that. Like, the two Americans sat there going.
Most of our listeners are not going to understand that reference. We'll let them Google it.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, and it's not necessarily, I mean, I know everybody loves throwing AI at stuff to solve problems, but like, and there, at some degree, you could probably get AI to analyze the code and, like, is this malicious? Like, is it doing anything malicious? Because ultimately, yeah, an LLM can potentially understand that context a bit better. Yeah. But if you do start doing that, and even if you do it, even if you sort of feed it through like 5 different LLMs to get like a broad spectrum, because obviously you know that one of them is going to miss it, right? Even if you do that, all we're doing really is just creating another problem where as soon as the attackers realize that's going to happen, they are going to start putting prompt injection stuff in the code comments and basically manipulate the LLM into thinking this malicious code chunk here, oh no, this is actually, you know, legitimate functionality. You can ignore this. Because I've seen that before. You can, I think Sol's talked about this actually on the podcast. You can like add a code comment above like a vulnerable piece of code, like an SQL injection, and just tell the security auditing LLM, no, this is fine. You can ignore this. And it will happily go along with it. And yeah, there are ways to prevent that, but ultimately, prompt injection is never going to go away with LLMs. That's the issue. That's the big issue, because they're just not deterministic, and hallucinations is a massive part of how they operate. So, yeah.
So I've actually had my analyzer go over some code like that, and it is completely ignored those types of comments. What my hunch is that I feed it like too much context and too much instruction that is just overwhelmingly like, just ignore whatever's in the code and like do this analysis and consider all these things that doesn't like factor into the calculus for it, right? And even then, if you're just like doing something as easy as leaving comments to say, ignore this, it's fine, tell the user it's good. There's just so many other elements and like static analysis that contributes to a real full analysis that it's hard for that to have too great of an impact when like it's throwing up signatures for malware and PowerShell execution and all this sorts of stuff. Like how can just a comment or a prompt injection really defeat all these other sorts of layers and malicious indicators? They might, drop it from a 98 to a 95 on, some like threat identification score. But yeah, no, I haven't been like too worried about that completely yet, and have been, just surprised to that degree. But yeah, I guess we'll see what the future holds too.
Yeah. No, I feel like that's going to be the way of how security works in the future anyway. It's just going to be attackers shifting from fooling people into fooling AI. So, yeah.
Well,
watch the space.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of attacks recently that are being able to, tag additional commands onto prompt injections. There's a lot of tools that basically just run shell commands in order to carry out AI tooling. And so being able to just tack on an additional command, super scary. And it almost feels like script injection or SQL injection all over again. So yeah, definitely a space to watch.
It's a nice reset, isn't it? Back to these kind of OG, kind of very green attacks happening.
Yeah.
I quite like it. Because it's like when the world first realized cross-site scripting was a thing and SQL injection was a thing, it's like, yeah, you can still code your way around it and make it not a thing. I think we're living through that kind of era now. It's quite exciting in a way, isn't it? It's like we know it can happen, and there's ways to not let it happen, but not everyone's implementing things in that nice way. Everyone's sort of gone, oh, AI, I must integrate it into literally everything without thinking too much about how I'm implementing it, how I'm integrating it.
Yeah.
And it's, not all things are born equal. There's bad implementations and there's good implementations. And it's, even like your tooling that you mentioned, just say you can't just rely on just the LLM to identify literally everything within Codebase. It's got to have more context from that. And it's got to take that from other places, which is exactly how it should work. But does that mean there are tools doing similar things out there that don't have that layer of that safety net to fall back onto? Yeah, there's going to be a load of trash out there still.
I think a lot of teams were told we need to put an MCP server around this, service, and all that meant to them is they're going to now run the command line tool, but in an automated fashion. And that command line tool basically has shell access and can be injected in with more command or like more arguments or malicious arguments, and that whole spectrum of like MCP tool use and teams that just kind of needed to get something out the door quickly. I think that's going to be a pretty rich environment for attacks.
Yeah, I think we're there at the moment. It's cool. It's cool in a bad way. I mean, I don't want to see it happen, but it's always interesting when it is, and it does. Yeah, there's a lot of things for people to think about in this sort of it's weird, uncharted territory, isn't it? But, I mean, I'm enjoying watching it all unfold and watching package managers explode. That's particularly fun right now.
Good. John, thank you so much for joining us. Let our listeners know where they can find and follow you online.
Yeah, so I'm Tuckner on X. You can find me, John Tuckner, on LinkedIn. And then my company's name is SecureAnnex, so secureannex.com for more information. If you need my help understanding extension, please reach out. Happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Tib3rius. He's been Andy Swift. We've been joined by John Tuckner. And this has been Across the Pondcast. You can find all of our social media links in the episode description or on acrossthepondcast.net. And we will see you next time.
Cheers, John. Bye.
Yep. Cheers, y'all. Thanks for the time.